Thank you for joining us. Presented here and today's e-workshop and this is Sirisha working as an assistant professor in Mother Teresa College of Engineering and Technology located at Peddapalli, Telangana state in India. So to welcome is to show honor and to welcome is to extend integrity. And I welcome all of you present here on one day e-workshop on scale development in social science research. On behalf of the management, principal, faculty, and entire student community of Mother Teresa College of Engineering and Technology is a first family of education, the place where the future techno graduates or design, an institution that makes students' dreams come true and given the hope to students who want to achieve their own dreams. And our college which enlightened our students from the past 20 years. Our college has well-planned campus, pollution-free environment, and with artistic buildings, well-furnished lecture halls, faculty, and fully digitalized library with many national and international journals and number of volumes of different streams. Well-equipped labs with an internet facility. Our college offers different courses such as BTech, MTech, MBA, and Diploma. The Department of MBA has a pack of highly qualified and well-experienced faculty and who are passionate to learn new technologies and conduct research on their own streams. They not only provide an enthusiastic environment but also conduct seminars, international conferences to make every student create and make them to get ready for the industrial requirements. Now I would like to invite the director of this e-workshop and the head of the department of MBA, Dr. E. Upendra sir, to share his insights regarding this e-workshop. It's over to the Dr. Upendra sir.
Yeah, very good morning to all. Yeah, yes, thank you, madam. Very good morning to all. Once again, I welcome to a one-day international workshop on scale development in social science research. Research is always a learning process. We have to always learn regarding new topic. The scale development is very difficult process. While we are doing research, while I am doing my research, we also learned about little the social scale development in social science research. It is very useful in research. Many scholars are developing many scales, different scales in research. We thought we want to conduct one workshop on social scale development in social science research. That's why I contacted Naga. Currently is working as a assistant professor in Central University of Jharkhand. He has more than 1 decade experience in teaching and research. Sir accepted our. Thank you, sir. Sir will join within 1 or 2 minutes. Thank you, madam. Thank you all. Yes. Yes, madam.
Thank you so much, sir. Yes, thank you so much, sir. That is such an informative message you have given. Next, I welcome the co-director of this e-workshop, and he is assistant professor of the MBA department. He is none other than E. Venkateshwarlu sir garu. Please share your views regarding this e-workshop.
Venkat, sir. Are you here?
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm getting.
Yes, yes. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Carry on, sir.
Yeah, a very warm welcome to e-workshop, and the workshop is on scale development in social science research. And I would like to say thank to our HOD, Upendra Saryaru, and also our director, Navata Madam Garu, and our respected principal, Dr. P. Srinivas Garu. They are cooperating us to conducting this event in our college. And also, I would like to say much thanks to Nagapavan Chintalapati Sir Garu to having this e-workshop in our college to enhancing the knowledge to our students as well as research scholars and even faculty members. I delighted to have this event in our college. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, over
Yes,
to you,
madam.
madam.
Yes, thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your valuable information. Next, I welcome a very talented and hardworking personality I had ever seen, Principal of Mother Teresa College of Engineering Technology. He is none other than Dr. T. Srinivas Sir garu to share his thoughts about this e-workshop. Over to you, sir.
Yes, Srinivas, sir. Yes. Madam, sir will join later. You can carry on.
Yes, sir. Yes, he'll join later and he'll share his thoughts. Next, I'm glad to invite a true inspiration to every girl student, one of the icons of women empowerment, the guest of honor, our dynamic director, Adavalli Navata ma'am, to share her insights regarding the e-workshop. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah. Madam also will join later. You can carry on, madam.
Yes. Now, I'm super excited to have you here. Excited about the presentation we'll get to have today. We have an amazing speakers and who will be sharing his knowledge and with us. And when I say amazing, I mean it. After the sessions, I hope you all pumped up and ready to conquer with the world. And he'll share his learning techniques to help you go from good to unforgettable. So it is my pleasure to introduce a resource person, Professor Dr. Nagapavan Chintalapati. So who is going to talk about on skill development in social science research. Let me introduce about himself before he is going to speak. So he had completed his MBA from Department of Commerce from Andhra University and he finished his PhD from University of Hyderabad. Post-graduation and diploma in training and development from the ICFA University of Tripura. Currently he is working as assistant professor in Central University of Jharkhand. His famous journals are examining the use of YouTube as a learning resource in higher education scale development and validation of TAM. It's a telematics and informatics model. He got several Best Paper Awards for TAM model in 2016 and also a case study of innovation in higher education in 3I intelligence. His interested research areas are social media and management education, strategic management, information technology, and entrepreneurship. So I really welcome you, sir, for giving your valuable information to the students.
Yes, Nagapavan, sir.
Thank you, Upender and all the team
Sir.
there. My voice is audible, I hope.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can present now, sir.
Okay, so I will be switching off my camera so that the clarity, the quality of my audio and my presentation doesn't suffer much. Okay, so please bear with me on that. Now, before I start and talk about this topic, just to break ice, can I have some comments on what you are expecting from this session? Somebody raised their hand already, Vaishnavi, I think. Can I have some comments on what are your expectations from this particular session, so that if possible, I'll try to answer them while speaking about the topic. Otherwise, we'll take them at the end of the session in a question and answer round.
Sure,
Can I have some comments? You can type
Yes,
some
sir.
comments if you want.
Good morning, sir. Good
morning.
morning, sir. Myself, Bishal Batwari. I'm a PhD research scholar from Department of Commerce, Guwahati University. Sir, I just wanted to know the importance of rating scales in research development.
Okay, fine. So you are looking at specifically which scale is suitable for what. I'll try
Yes,
to
sir.
answer that to the extent possible. Okay. Any other
Thank you, sir.
comments?
Thank you so much, sir.
Any other comments and any other observations that you would like to share, so that I know the audience is actually prepared to make some observations or prepared to understand from their own perspective how this is relevant for their own research or their career progression.
Regarding major and minor projects, sir.
Okay, major and minor projects, I will not be commenting much on them because that's outside the scope of the study. But if you have a question or something, you can always get in touch with me. Okay. But see, we are going to talk about the concept of quantitative research in more detail. Major and minor research projects is more of an administrative funding issue. Okay. Sorry, Arjuna ji, that's not the scope of my current talk, but you can always get in touch with me. My details are available on my university website, or I can share them in the end of the talk, so you can talk to me. Anyone else?
Sir, end of the lecture we will take, sir.
Okay, end of the lecture we will take. Thank you, Upendra. We'll start now.
That's okay, sir.
Okay. So I'll just switch off my camera and then go to the presentation.
Others don't press on present button while sir is presenting.
And one more request, please keep your mics on mute. And only if you have a question, please raise your hand. I'll try to get back to you. Or you can type it in the chat window. We'll be tracking that as and when we can take the questions, we'll take them. Thank you. And let's start the session now. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about is basically what is called. Now, this is the outline that I will be mentioning. Okay. We'll talk about what is measurement. We'll talk about the types of scales. We'll talk about the latent variables and constructs. We'll talk about the steps in scale development. And we'll talk about the concept of how scales are useful for quality research output. Now, let us first jump into this concept called measurement. See, there are two types of research, as all of you would be aware: qualitative research and quantitative research. You can always debate saying that qualitative research is good, quantitative research is good, mixed research is good. That's not the scope of my current talk. My talk is mostly about measurement and why measurement is important. See, when we talk about quantitative research, when we want to quantify something, for example, let us take customer satisfaction, which is most commonly used scale that is called Rater scale, which is going to talk about service quality. Okay. Now, why do we need to measure? First question. How do we measure is the second question. What are the issues in measurement? There's the third question. So, what to measure is coming from your theoretical perspective regarding your study. So that is qualitative in nature. Determining what to measure is a qualitative decision for the researcher to take. Now, let me just give you an example. We are all in a lockdown situation across the world because of this pandemic called Corona or COVID-19. Now, what should I measure? Should I measure the unemployment rate, employment, or new industry output, new industrial output? Well, how do I quantify the economic impact of this lockdown in any country? Because statistics are something that will give you all the opinions, provided you look at what part of the numbers you are looking at. Okay, so the measurement has to be done in a very, very systematic fashion, in a very, very defined fashion. So the process of measurement or operationalization involves rules for assigning numbers to objects to represent quantities of attributes. Look at this, a simple definition of Nunnally of 1967. Okay, Nunnally as a person has done a lot of work on scale development. You can maybe get his book on this topic from internet. There is a PDF there available there, or you can go to any library and you will get a copy of it. University of Hyderabad does have a hard copy of this book. The rules for assigning numbers. So what you have is a rule for assigning what is called numbers, quantification, to objects. Objects like, for example, company, human being, okay, state, location, district, mandal, anything, to represent the quantities of attributes. So these attributes are what you are measuring. Okay. We cannot measure the objects directly, so we are measuring the attributes of that object. For example, if I want to measure the temperature, I have a thermometer. I can measure the temperature and say this is so and so degree Fahrenheit or so and so degree centigrade or so and so degree Kelvin. Okay, there is an instrument to measure that directly. Now I want to measure the health of a person. I want to say if the person is healthy or not. So health is a representation of multiple attributes. The person should have normal sugar. His diabetes, the sugar should be in control. The BP should be in control. The pulse rate should be in control. The body should not have temperature. The heart, the chest, the lungs, the kidneys. There are multiple parts of the body which have to be examined before you come to a conclusion that the person is healthy. And these are also balancing things. Like, for example, somebody who is 5 foot 10 inches height and 120 kilos weight versus somebody who is 5 foot 4 inches height and 90 kilos weight. Who is healthy, who is not healthy? Add one more attribute. One person is a weightlifter, another person is not. So you understand that these assigned numbers are based on certain attributes, and these attributes are also to be judged properly. So it is the attributes of the objects that are measured and not the objects themselves. Second, the definition does not specify the rules by which the numbers are assigned. So it does not say, no, you assign 1, 2, 3, 4, or you assign 10, 11, 12, 13. The numbers have to be assigned by the rules defined by the researcher. The rigor with which the rules are specified and the skill with which they are applied determine whether the construct has been captured by the measure or not. The rigor with which the rules are specified and the skill with which they are applied. So first is defining the rules. The other one is application of the skill of applying these rules in a proper systematic fashion rather than with bias. Okay. So this is something that this is a presentation that I have created in 2020 for a talk somewhere else. So the date is not today's date. Okay. So this was done a year back to a different audience. So measurement is about the true value of a measure is xt. The observed value of the measure is xo. Xt and xo are basically representative ideas. So the observed value is a combination of true value plus the systematic source of error and the random sources of error. This is what makes research very interesting. From one researcher to when you look at this concept of measurement, measurement will keep changing. Is there is the systematic source of error and the random sources of error. What are these things and why are they important is again a different topic completely, but awareness of the existence of these sources of error is something that you should be very, very aware of. Even if you want to eliminate completely all source of error, it is not possible because you can work on the systematic sources of error, but not on the random sources of error. Because random sources are related to the biases and the personal factors that come from the respondents or the researchers. So these are some of the problems with measurement. Measurement may not truly reflect the object being measured because true differences in other relatively stable characteristics which affect the score. For example, if you go and ask somebody today, okay, about are you happy staying at home? The answer may be yes or no, or the answer may be in a rating scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. You can use any kind of a measurement there. The answer may change if the person has somebody in the family who has suffered with corona or somebody in their friend circle who has suffered mostly, and they say, no, I'm not happy being at home because it indicates the suffering of my family and my relatives and my friends. The person's willingness to express his or her true feelings is the first reason for the measurement gap. The second reason is the difference due to transient personal factors. Transient means something which changes from time to time, even from minute to minute. A person's mood, state of fatigue. Okay. See, for example, if you are sitting at home watching a wonderful television serial or a wonderful cricket match or a tennis match, and somebody says, okay, why, please come, I want to talk to you for 2 minutes. Maybe you will not even bother listening to that person because you are engrossed in that activity that is of interest to you. So the person's mood, the state of fatigue, all these things are transient personal factors. Differences due to situational factors. Situational factors which are also again transient or more or less stable to some extent. Like for example, I am interviewing a person in a park. I'm interviewing a person coming out of a supermarket with 2 fully loaded bags in hand. Okay. Now, obviously, if I am carrying a lot of maybe 30-40 kilos of weight in my hands, and you ask me, sir, why don't you answer 2 questions of mine? I'll have the angriest look possible so that that person doesn't disturb me further. So these are situational factors. You are calling somebody for an interview and saying that, okay, for 2 hours you are spending with me, I'll give you this gift. Maybe a person will spend more time. Okay. Now the question comes is, should we pay the respondents for their time? That's again a dilemma question that is part of research design issues, but again that exists. Differences due to variations in who the interviewer is or who the person doing that particular data collection is. Okay. Differences due to the sampling of items. What items are used in the questionnaire? What is the word choice? What are the... See, for example, if I want to find out the state of happiness of a person, I say I am happy, I am delighted, I am ecstatic. Okay, I'm using English words which are synonyms, but all three represent different levels of happiness. Okay, I am not sad. If I say I am not sad, does it represent happiness? I am very happy, I am engrossed, I am delighted, I am ecstatic, I am in a state of nirvana, which is what I don't know. The words that you use has different meanings for different people, and how are you certain that the word means the same thing to everybody? And the second point that comes up is this language of this questionnaire is regarding the translation of the questions from one language to another language, the cultural context of the words. Okay. So whenever you are using a questionnaire of any other study adapted to your own context, you need to be clear that these differences will arise because the concept. So, for example, I was doing a study on social capital as part of my PhD work, and there was one point on social capital that says, I am sure my friends will lend me $100 of rupees. This was a question that was used by a US researcher for a study on social capital. Now I have option one, $100 into 75 rupees, let us say 70, okay, 7,500. I am sure my friends will lend me 7,500 rupees. Should I do that? 2, should I ask this question at all? So the point is, let us understand that all of us as researchers are depending on the past research that has been carried out on a related topic or the exact topic. We need to be aware of the importance of verifying every part of the study that you are using so that you are not being mistakenly made to do some study of error because you did not examine the study that you have based your current research on. Okay. Differences due to the lack of clarity of measuring instruments. Again, please understand, I'm not talking about instrumentation based measures here. I'm talking about qualitative research, social science research, which uses questionnaires or interviews, which are basically using words, maybe some amount of observations, but observations also have some biases. Okay. Differences due to lack of clarity of measuring instruments, vague questions, ambiguous questions, interpreted differently by others. So this 5th and 6th point is more or less going together. And the 7th point is mechanical factors that are there in the questionnaire that is filled. So, for example, somebody puts a tick mark. Many of you may be teachers and students. If you remember your multiple choice questions, students have this habit of changing from A to B. So they put somewhere in middle of A and B, saying that, sir, A or B, you can choose. Okay. So you need to ensure that if you are using tick marks, the boxes are specified. If you are using some other way of capturing the data, it has to be done in a proper fashion. Especially when the handwriting of the person is not necessarily legible. So, for example, I asked the income of the candidate. Somebody writes, okay, 10,000 rupees. Okay. Per month, 10,000 rupees is what they want to write. Okay, they added a 0 to it or they reduced a 0 from it. Your entire answer is wrong. Okay. The second problem is more of a researcher issue. The data has come, I have to code it. For example, I have gender. Gender, normally we use male and female. Today in India, there is a rule that you have to have a third gender. So let us say 1, 2, 3 as my coding criteria. So while typing, instead of 1, 2, I pressed 3, or instead of 2, I pressed 1, or I pressed 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 0, or I have a blank entry because the typist thought he had typed or she has typed and the entry was not there in the Excel. You have to go back and check the physical document of the questionnaire. So please remember exactly while typing or while coding the data, you have to be very, very careful that the code has been correctly captured for that observation that has been measured. Whenever we do these errors, then the data may be unusable. Okay. So sometimes what we do is we do data entry and we also actually randomly check from that physical data and the Excel data, saying that, okay, randomly let us pick a few questionnaires and see whether the entry was not run wrongly. Okay, especially when you have multiple employees doing it, it is very important for you to verify it, especially if you're talking about funded research with research assistants and people like that. Okay, so this is the example. I have given example while I was speaking, but let us see the example again here. How to select a candidate for a job? It's a business question. What are the tools of selection? In HR, you would have got a list of tools like application blank, written test, group discussion, interview, demonstration, psychological profiling, observation, medical examination, reference check, others. So what is the criteria that my company wants to have? The person should be intelligent to do the job. Okay, this is the criteria that has been set. But how do I measure intelligence? So should I use IQ tests? How do we ensure that the score we are getting reflects the correct intelligence of the individual? What should be the content of the IQ test? Because many IQ tests are dependent on pictorial representations and language questions like English and numerical ability and things like that. So am I going to look at the IQ of the candidate based on these things? Because a person may be excellent in human relations and can do a wonderful job in a customer interface position. But am I measuring that? What if the candidate does not know English? Many of us have this problem that we are not completely proficient in the language of English because that is not our mother tongue. That is not the language of choice for many of us. We do it because it's part of our professional life. So if you go back and look at that movie of Three Idiots or something like that, or there are some movies where the person is wonderful in Hindi and other local languages, but not very good with English. I'll give you a personal example from my own teaching career. I have a student of MBA who said, sir, I can't learn English. I said, what is your career ambition? He says, sir, I will do job in my local district, maximum district headquarters. I don't want to go away from my village, and maximum what I will do is I'll go to the district headquarters. So when what business will you do? He says, I'll go into something related to construction or cement or paints or something like that. Something very, very local business. I said, fine. Then, but the examination will be in English. So he said, the student said, okay, fine. I'll write the exam in English. I can read English, but I can't speak it fluently. So I said, okay, fine. I can't change a person unless they are willing to change. So I said, fine. You do the examination part and improve your language ability, because all the legal documents that you will be seeing will be in English. If you are into business and you want to do business in India, your legal documents are in English. I said, fine. So the student did not pick up the communication skills in English and oral communication. He's very good in the written part and the reading part. The student later on went on to, it's almost a decade past story. And a decade later, or not even decade, I think more than 2003, 5, that is 16 years back. The student is doing wonderfully well and is now having his own distribution ship of cement. And he doesn't use English. Does it mean the person is not good just because they don't speak English? Again, this is something that you have to experience. What if the candidate has limited exposure to mathematics? Because IQ test will have language, mathematics, and pictures with colors different. There is a wonderful example we give in advertising class regarding pictures. There was an advertisement of a washing powder where the first panel on the left side, okay, the first panel starting from left to right, I'm speaking. The first panel had lot of dirty clothes and a washing powder packet and a bucket of water. The second picture has these clothes and the washing powder into the bucket of water. And the third picture from the left had clean clothes hanging and the washing powder packet and the water bucket having dirty water. This is just a pictorial advertisement. There is no words there. This is a practical example which is there in a advertising textbook. So it's not something that I have experienced myself. So this advertisement is taken and they just put it in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia because it's an international brand of washing powder. And they find surprisingly that now none of this washing powder is getting sold. So they said, what is the problem? Because there is no language, there is no translation errors. So the advertising people were not really understanding. So suddenly somebody went and observed that actually English is read from left to right, Arabic is read from right to left. Saudi Arabia speaks Arabic and Arabic is basically from right to left. So what the audience of that particular pictorial advertisement, a panel is seeing, is they are seeing lot of clean clothes being put into a bucket of water and a detergent and suddenly becoming dirty. So clean clothes, dirty is being transferred and the water is getting cleaned. So candidates culture, I don't know, your examination has to be used on all these things. Now the objectives of measurement is to produce the observable scores which are approximately the true scores. Okay, but we don't know what the true scores are. We only have inferences. The quality of these inferences depends directly on the procedures that are used to develop the measures. So you have to have a reliability or a validity index for this particular quality of measurement. Okay, I'll take a little short question right now. If you have any questions that you would like to ask, I'll go through the chat window here and see. Intelligence is compared by his or her responses. Intelligence is not necessarily language based, it is the skills that matter. Sailaja, the skills, what skills can you measure in a questionnaire based or in a written paper based examination? That is always the question that I'm asking. Your instrument of measuring intelligence may not necessarily be exactly correct. Okay.
Good morning, sir. But
yes,
excuse me, sir.
Please.
Yeah. So if we have two
Shailaja.
Yes, sir.
Okay, correct.
Let her complete. Let her complete.
Shailaja, let's our complete lecture. Last we can ask.
Okay, sir.
Okay, fine. Since the organizers want me to complete the talk, please restrict your questions. Please keep your questions. We'll discuss them.
Yes, sir.
Syed Khadar on IQ versus EQ versus SQ skill sets of management. Again, that's an entirely different debate. I just took IQ because it's the easiest. Okay. Yes, most are misleading is the point I'm making in the question, in the entire talk I just did. Okay. Friends, please keep your questions. Please make the comments. I'll answer them. Okay. Because the organizers would like to have a separate question and answer session after the talk. So levels of measurement, this is something that all of you are aware. I'm just touching again. Nominal measure, ordinal measure, interval measure, and ratio skills. Sorry. So let me talk from the bottom of it. Ratio scale is something where there is an absolute zero, that is a null, there is a value which is very, very defined, and you can have the incremental values are always in a proportion to the next increment. So if I say 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, 5 to 6, it's an increment of 1. Or if I say 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%, it is defined. If I say 0.5%, it is exactly between 0 and 1. Okay. If I say 0.4%, it is exactly 40% away from 0 and 60% away from 1. Okay. That is the ratio scale. An interval scale doesn't have an absolute zero, but have a defined intervals. However, these intervals need not be proportionate. For example, when I ask you a 5-point Likert scale saying that very unhappy, unhappy, neutral, happy, very happy. Now, what is the difference between, is the difference between happy and very happy and very unhappy and unhappy the same? In a ratio scale, it is. In an interval scale, it may not necessarily be. Okay. So that is something that you need to remember. An ordinal scale is something where there is an order in measurement, nothing more than that. So 100, 200, 600, 1000 is an ordinal scale. It doesn't matter. We don't know what 1 means, what 600, what 600 means, what 1000 means, what 1600 means. Doesn't matter. We know that one is above other. Okay. For example, somebody studying intermediate, that is +2 in Indian education, and somebody studying graduation, is the number of years of study this incremental in nature? If I say somebody is doing MBA, are we sure that they have done 15 years of education, 16 years of education, or 20 years of education? We don't know. Okay. Because if somebody has done an MBBS degree and has gone for an MBA degree, the number of years of study they would have undergone is completely different from somebody who has done a basic graduation in commerce or sciences or BBA and coming to an MBA program in India. And it is completely different from somebody who has done another master's and then coming for education into master's because they want, or somebody doing a BTech, MTech and then coming for a MBA degree because of their job requirements. Okay. So we can't really say that these are all proportionate in nature or there is a specified interval there. But we know that one is below and one is above. Post-graduation is above, graduation is below. Okay. And then we come to what is called nominal scales. Nominal scales are where you are basically putting some number just because you have to put some number there. For example, when I say male, female, in most of the researchers, if you use auto coding in SPSS, female becomes 1 and male becomes 2, or female becomes 0 and male becomes 1, depending on your coding pattern. Because F is alphabetically before M. Does it mean anything? If I put male as 1 and female as 2, or I put male as 100 and female as 1000, hardly matters. Okay. But please understand why I am mentioning the numbers assigned to it, because previous slide, if you remember, okay, the rigor with which the rules are specified and the skill with which they are applied determine whether the construct has been captured or not. Okay. For example, I want to measure the competence of a person, the digital competence of a person or the computer competence of a person. How do I measure it? Okay. This is an interesting question that I always pose to students and scholars. How do you measure the competence of a person to use a computer? I can say, okay, please rate your competence on using a laptop on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not competent, 10 being very competent. I get some number. Okay. I used a different thing. The same question when I was asking, I used this question. How do you rate your competence on computers? I said the one value is I can help others for their computer problems. The second description of the item is, okay, I can comfortably use for my purposes. Third item is I need help sometimes. Fourth item is I need support for major things. Fifth is I am not comfortable using computers. These are the 5 items that I have used. This is for individual. So what I rate myself as a competent person using computers may not be somebody else's self-rating, may not be exactly same. Okay. I may have a programming background, I may have an engineering degree, and I may necessarily have an understanding of computers which is very, very deep. But I feel that I am not as good as somebody else who is working on computers in a bigger institute. So my self-rating would be lower compared to somebody who's exposed only to MS Office, Word, Excel and PowerPoint and thinks that they are very good with computers. Okay. So the problem in the self-rating mechanism is this also. Do people really have the ability to rate themselves? Do the people really have the ability to give a value to the the attributes that are being measured, to the objects that have been measured. Okay. So validity of a measure. So this is about the measurement part. We'll come to the validity of a measure. Validity of measure is when the XO is equal to XT. That means the random and systematic sources of error are somewhere getting cancelled or nullified. So there are different validity measures. Again, this is purely theoretical lecture. You have face validity, content validity, predictive validity, concurrent validity, pragmatic, construct, convergent, discriminant. Normally we use convergent validity, discriminant validity, construct validity, and face validity. But you can do a lot of other things. Okay, I'm not going to discuss any of these things in detail because that's a different topic altogether. So we come to reliability of the measure. Reliability of the measure is when the random error is 0. A measure is reliable to the extent that the independent but comparable measures of same trait or construct. Now there's this interesting experiment you can do with any machine. If you have your pulse oximeter or your thermometer or anything at home, if I measure the same object, that is the same person's temperature, with a gap of every 5 minutes, does it give the same reading? Or if you look at a weighing scale, a person wearing the same dress, wearing the same hairstyle, wearing the same accessories is standing on a weighing machine with an interval of 10 minutes each. Does the weight change? Yes, it changes, because the quality of that measurement is within maybe 10 grams to 500 grams depending on the kind of sensitivity that machine has got. Okay. So many times what happens is when you are going for these Olympic rounds, people would always like to be measured after their entire body water is taken out, so that the weight comes down and they can go into the competition of a bout which is at a lower level rather than at a higher level. So there are different techniques like Cronbach alpha. Cronbach alpha can be measured using what is called inter-item correlation. There is a split half test and a test retest method of reliability also. Test retest is what I have mentioned regarding the thermometer or the weighing scale. You're testing the same thing again and again. But in social science research, you cannot do test retest because the person has already been exposed to the questionnaire. Their next round of answering the questions may not necessarily be as true or as unexposed as the first round. Okay. Split half is splitting the questions into two halves or two parts and measuring the correlation between these two parts results. Again, how do you split is always a question mark. Okay. But don't worry about all those things. Nowadays, it's only Cronbach alpha. You just have to go to SPSS and test the reliability using Cronbach alpha measure, which is 0.7 is what is a defined condition. Okay. Again, let me see if there are some questions I can pass observations on. Okay. Now I think it is not nominal. It is nominal, not ordinal. I think Vishal, the answer has been given by Syed. Yes, it is nominal, not ordinal, because you can't say male is better than female or female is better than male. Okay. What is the difference between range and interval? See, range has a minimum and a maximum. Interval is the proportions between the different measures. Okay. Or does it evaluate with values? See, the best scale to have is ratio scale, because you can make an ordinal, nominal, and an interval scale from a ratio value. See, for example, if I have the date of birth of a candidate, I can calculate the date in number of days. I can calculate the age of the person in number of days. I can put them into categories. That is interval scale. I can put them into an order: young, adult, old, senior citizen. I can also put them into a nominal categories. So if you can measure ratio scale, that's the best thing you can do, because you can convert it into any other scale very easily. You can't upgrade the scale, you can always downgrade the scale. So if I have to give the example of date of birth only, or you can take income. So for example, I have the monthly income of a family. I can talk about whether they are below poverty line, above poverty line, whether they are middle class, lower middle class, upper middle class, rich people or poor people. I can also talk about the ordinal value and the nominal categorization. Okay. Yes, nominal does not have any prioritization values. Okay. Okay. Competence is a personal subjective opinion. Can someone may be a professional in coding? See, that's what was my point. Again, that is, then it is discrimination in number. Okay, fine. Okay. See, the point we are making is measurement always have problems because people who are responding to your questions need not necessarily be competent to respond. That is why the first and foremost evaluation criteria for quality of research is the quality of your respondents. The quality of your respondents will determine whether your observations have some validity or not. It is not necessarily the quantity of observations. Please understand this carefully. I want to measure the future of the stock market in India, or I want to measure the future of cryptocurrency in India. These are very interesting studies. The future of cryptocurrency, let us say. I go and ask some finance teachers of multiple MBA colleges or institutions their opinions on this. That is first study I have done based on the faculty members' opinions on cryptocurrency. The second study, I took the respondents from the banking sector. I went and spoke to banking professionals of which something around 20 years of experience at various levels of banking. The third study, again on banking, but I went and spoke to only people at the level of senior management. People who have got 25 years of work experience and working at the senior levels. Then next level, I went and spoke to economists who are working with central bank and other national banks. So for each of these studies, the acceptance of the study is going to be different. Then I went and said, okay, no, these are all the people who are on the banking side. Let me talk to the IT people. I went and spoke to some computer science professionals who are working on digital technologies. Okay. So the quality of my respondents, the criteria for selecting my respondents will determine the acceptability of my quantitative research findings. It's also for qualitative research, but I'm talking about quantitative research. So it is mostly about who your respondents are and are they competent to answer the questions that you are raising. Okay. So let us come to the steps in developing better measures. Now, before I go into these steps, the first question that people have is, sir, should we always develop a scale? Can we not use an existing scale? Because most of us are researchers, we feel, okay, let me use this particular author. For example, the TAMS scale that I've used, the technology acceptance model has been there for almost 3+ decades. Okay. There are various papers, thousands and thousands of papers on TAM that have been published by various professionals from various countries. So should I develop a new scale? Maybe I need to, because one of the best papers that I have published on scale development was a development of a new scale for a different situation. So you may have to develop a new scale. You may have to validate an existing scale. You may have to validate an existing model. So the research that you are carrying out will determine whether you are using a scale that is already developed and you are adapting it, or you are developing a scale by yourself. Whether you are adapting a scale or you are developing a scale, you need to be clear about the steps of scale development, because if you are not sure of these things, then the acceptance of your scale or acceptance of your quantitative analysis is suspect. A reviewer is going to be very, very critical if you are not specifying, or you are not examining these steps in your output of your research document. Okay. So let's come to these steps. Again, domain of a construct, sample of items, collect data, purification of the items, that is reducing the number of items or adding additional items if needed. Collect data again, assess the reliability of the questionnaire, assess the validity, and develop some norms or some rules for the scale to be used by others. Now this is something called scales. 2 or more items when taken together constitute a test or a scale. The total score of the scale is typically intended to measure an underlying attribute or a characteristic, that is the construct. The scale score is formed by simply summing the item scores. Okay. Now, is it only summation? Can we not have multiplication? It doesn't really work like that, because we are measuring different aspects of the person. Say for example, if I want to find out whether somebody is medically fit to be part of the armed forces of India or the police forces of the different states, should I look at only one parameter like BP, sugar and heartbeat, or should I look at a lot of other things? See, somebody who has got a lower hemoglobin score, should we consider them eligible for the armed forces or the police forces or not? So you have a particular series of tests, and some of these tests are compulsory in the nature that if there is any negative value in that particular test, you are out immediately. Some of these are balanced. Say for example, somebody is underweight. Somebody is underweight may not be a reason for rejecting somebody. Somebody is short may be a reason, because we don't know whether the person will grow or not. Somebody is underweight, definitely you can give them good food and raise their weight. So you need to understand that certain attributes are important, certain attributes are not. You balance these attributes in social science research to find out a overall value for that particular construct or variable or the object being measured. If we divide a test into subtests, we form what are called as subscales. Subscales can be formed based on a priori or theoretical basis, or can be formed on the empirical basis. So for example, the Rater scale, RATER scale of Parasuraman et al. On service quality has 5 aspects called reliability, okay, tangibility, okay, empathy, trust, and assurance. Okay. Now, can I only measure the reliability part of that particular service quality measurement? Maybe you can, but you have to theoretically establish the logic of your measurement so that it becomes more acceptable. Why should we have multi-item scales? Why not a single item? For example, I want to measure satisfaction of the customer. Are you satisfied with this product? Yes, no. And my job is done. But that scale really does not help us to understand what yes means or what no means. So, if you have a single item measurement with only 2 categories, yes, no, you are only having 2 groups. Okay. If you have a 7-step rating scale or a 7-point rating scale, then you can have 7 levels of an attribute. If I have 2 questions of 7 levels each, then I can have 14 points. Between 2 and 14, it's 12 points. If I have a 10-point scale and 5 items for each point in the scale, then 5 into 10, 50 items. I got from 5 to 50, a range of 46 is there. Okay. Individual items have higher measurement error than having a multi-item scale. Okay. So the next question comes up is, sir, what is the minimum number or what is the maximum number? If you look at Cronbach alpha, anything about 10 items, if you have in a scale, Cronbach alpha will always give a good result. Okay. So that being the case, people normally have a minimum of 3 because that's what Amos requires for analysis. There are some scales with only 2 items, but they are rare. There is a software called PLS which helps you to do structured equation modeling analysis for only 2 item based variables. But again, that's something about statistics. We have between 3 to 6 or 3 to 7 normally. 3, 4, 5 is normal, what I observe in research papers that I go through. Sir, can we not have 10, 12, 15? Yes, definitely you can have. There are papers with 12, 15, 20 also. Okay. But then they are defined and measured in a very, very systematic fashion. And the logic of why the number of items are more is also given in that particular proposing the scale. The norms of the scale will specify why they need to have multiple questions. The specificity of items can be averaged out when they are combined. By combining items, one can relatively find make relatively fine distinctions among people. I mentioned also already. Reliability tends to increase and measurement error decreases as the number of items in a combination increases. This is what I said about 10 reliability. 10 items, your Cronbach alpha is always going to be very good. How comfortable would you feel having your intelligence being assessed on the basis of our response to a single question? I'll give you a personal example again. I attended an interview in my very beginning part of my career. Okay. This was a telephonic interview. I was actually not prepared for the interview. This was something that they sprung up on us. Okay. And I was a fresher at that time. I really can't say no to an interview being done by a senior person from the company that I'm actually starting my job. Actually, I was supposed to start that job because the interview was already done. I was given the offer to join. And suddenly they said, you have to have another round of telephonic interview from our senior manager, or there is a managing director of the company. I said, fine, ask. So they gave the telephone call to me. They connected on the telephone and gave me the receiver and said, okay, please answer. So there were two questions that were asked. If all of you are management students to a large extent, so you will understand. The first question is on BCG matrix, and the second question is on TRP rating. Okay. I still remember the questions because that was the one interview where I gave the answer completely wrong. Okay. So the point is, my entire chance of getting a job is lost because I did not answer one question, or I answered it wrongly. Do I not know the answer? I know the answer, but I got it wrong. 1 second. See, the perils of working from home. You are disturbed by something or the other. Anyway, so, and that was the example that I want to talk about. My chances of getting a job is lost because of one question. So somebody made a judgment on my ability to do or not do a job based on the question that I did not answer. Fine, that is, at least there is a question that I did not answer. There was another interview. I went for a very big multinational chain. The interview went off well. I was very happy with the kind of responses I gave and the kind of interaction that I had with the panel. And after a week, 2 weeks period, I was told, no, you are not taken. It was through a consultant. So I asked the consultant this question: what went wrong? Because I want to know how I can improve for the higher level jobs. The consultant said, your accent of English is not suitable for them. They were looking at American accent speech when I was having the mother tongue influence and my speech. Nowadays it has a lot of Hindi tinge, but at that time it was having a lot of Telugu tinge, which was my mother tongue. This is my mother tongue. So they did not take me, not because my competence is not there, but my ability to communicate in an accent that they want is not there. I'm not naming both these institutions, but the point is, if the judgment is based on completely illogical things in that condition, obviously I don't know why I was not taken. The first case I know at least that I was not taken because I did not answer the questions. Okay, later on I came to know why both places I did not get through, but that's a different story altogether. But the point I'm making is this: in your real life, when you attend an interview, when you answer some questions, the randomness of these questions may make your life difficult. Some of you would have defended your PhD, or some of you would have presented your research papers in conferences, and somebody raises a question which you wouldn't have thought of. Recently, I was talking to one of my juniors in PhD regarding their own research, and I asked a question: what domain of management do you classify your research into? Because one thing is, most of the jobs are not based on your PhD. They are based on your ability to teach a particular specialization paper or a particular basic paper of that specialization area. So I asked that student, now, what is the area that your PhD falls under? The student said, I don't know. I'm doing an analysis on big data. Oh, you don't have a paper called big data. Even if you have a paper called big data in some of these institutions, it is mostly into IT subjects. And the person doesn't have an IT degree, person has a basic graduation and a post graduation in MBA, not from a technical space. So these are the questions that I'm just leaving it with you. Okay. How comfortable are you feel? Do you feel having your intelligence assessed on the basis of your response to a single question? This is like the political comments that were made when the current health minister, who happens to be the chemical minister also, Mansukh the Gujarati minister, made some tweets in wrong English, spelling mistakes and things like that. And people said, no, you have this minister who doesn't write English properly. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know whether the person is competent or not. I'm not the judge for that. The Prime Minister felt he is suitable and he will be a minister whether I like it or not. But I just remembered some newspaper and news channel in Telugu speaking atrocious Telugu and writing atrocious Telugu. And they are basically Telugu journalists and Telugu newspaper people. I said, do we have different measurement criteria for two different people? I don't know. We leave these questions because, see, one interesting thing that I would always ask the social science researchers to look at is you please observe your surroundings. You get a lot of understanding of what is possible and what is not possible just because you keep track of what is happening around you. That's just an advice and not topic related. So we come to latent variables. Variables that are not directly observed but inferred are called latent variables. What is observed is called observed variable. The latent variables can reduce the dimensionality of the data. Dimensions means multiple items. If you reduce, that is why if you talk about factor analysis in SPSS, it's called dimension reduction technique. Because you take some 40 items and that is 40 dimensions and you make them into maybe 5 or 6 variables. So from 40 dimensions, you brought them to 5 dimensions. So there are direct measures, indirect measures, observed and latent. Observed is height, weight, age. Indirect like depression, stress, satisfaction. Indirect also is called as latent variables. Direct is also defined as observed variables. Okay. So the nature of the construct will tell you how you are going to measure it. Continuous distribution, ratio scale, dichotomous distribution, as no binary, polytomous distribution sorted into more than 2 mutually exclusive or exhaustive categories. And you have ordered categorical scales called Likert scales. Okay. So these are the 4 forms of scales that you can have based on individual differences to be exhibited. I think this would answer the first question that I started that was asked to me regarding what is suitable scale for which situation. The dimension 2 that you have is the breadth versus narrowness of the construct. If you are having broad constructs like general intelligence or a narrow construct like numerical abilities. Okay. So a broad construct will have several subdomains of the content, whereas narrow construct has one narrower focus. The third dimension is context independence. Context dependence is talking about general context independent constructs like general intelligence, depression, etc., or context dependent constructs like phobia, anxiety, stress. I don't know how many of you are into public speaking as orators. Most of you are teachers. We teach a class of maybe a large number, but if you are asked to address an audience of thousands of students in a university campus or a college campus, do you have something called anxiety and stress? That's context dependent. Today, it's easy for us to form opinions at our home, discuss with our friends over a cup of tea or coffee. You are asked to express the same opinions in a public fora. Again, a question mark comes. So these are context dependent constructs. Now the question comes is, sir, can depression be context dependent? Maybe, but normally depression doesn't come and go. It is medically, it is not, it is defined as something which exists for a continuous period. So the definition of the construct is important. Please be clear on that. Definition will determine whether what particular problems are there with the measurement of that construct. The time consistency, temporal consistency, or versus fluctuation or instability. Personality dimensions are stable over time, and medically talking about bipolar disorder, there's this entire movie called Aparichitudu in Telugu. I don't know what is the Tamil version or what is, there is a movie where the person just changes from a very soft, sophisticated lawyer who is very soft, very soft spoken and not violent, to a person who becomes violent and just starts killing people using different violent techniques. That's called bipolar disorder. You have this Gajini movie of Amir Khan where person just forgets everything after every 15 minutes. So we don't know. Obviously, some things are stable, some things are not. In medical science research, in psychology research, you have very defined criteria. But even in social science, it's possible, because if you're talking about a person's views on wearing a helmet while traveling on a bike, if I ask you at the age of 18, the answer may be different. If I ask you age of 40, the answer may be different. If I ask you at the age of 18, after you saw an accident of your friend, versus I ask you at the age of 40, after you saw an accident of your friend, the answer may be different. Just based on age, based on the situation. The temporal duration is another dimension that we need to look at. Acute problems are those that may be marked at a present time but are expected to reduce over time or wane over time. Chronic problems are those likely to remain invariant over time or to recur predictably across time. Okay. Again, I'm giving you psychology examples because that's where the entire research on scale development has been done in greater detail. Most of these are psychological measurements, so psychology has the basic underlying philosophy of measurement in greater detail. So I'm going with that. You can have that even for any other subject. If you want to discuss, we can take it up with the examples of your own research. Specifying domain of a construct is the first challenge that you have got. So now we are coming to the steps. These are the steps. Domain of construct, sample of items, collect data, purify measures. If there is previous literature, wonderful, you can take it from there. If there is no previous literature, then you do what is called qualitative research. Okay. Now, for example, human response to pandemic.
Sir, excuse me, Nagapon, sir.
Please.
Sir, you have 15 minutes time is there, sir? Many questions.
Sure. I'm
15 minutes
actually
time.
coming to the end. Don't worry.
Okay, sir.
This is basically, I'll just give an overview of these steps and that ends the lecture. Okay. So, the pandemic that we are currently going through, do we have any past literature on that? Maybe we have something on Spanish flu. Maybe we have something on other flus of generations before which people are not aware of. So, you have to formulate your own mechanism of doing it. So, consider the term consumer convenience. What does it include or exclude? You consult the existing literature. If the literature doesn't exist, you do qualitative research. Focus group discussions, interviews, observational studies, case studies, ethnographic studies. Okay. One of the observations that I have got about this pandemic is people have decided not to go long distances away for their jobs or long distances away for their education. Okay. The admission into same localities, that is within the same district or within the same state for different higher education programs has increased compared to people going to other states for studies, is something that has been observed in the recent admissions. So we come for literature reviews, another technique we use, published research using same construct or similar constructs. Qualitative research, exploratory in nature, develops the characteristics of the construct you would like to study. Again, I'm nothing to do with qualitative research, I'm not touching that. So there are different methods for scales construction. But there is this wonderful source that you can read about that. There's something called empirical keying, there's something called factor analytic, and there's something called as rational approach. Empirical keying is something where you identify groups you want to differentiate, users versus non-users, male versus female, anything. For example, education, investment on education for female and male kids. That's the group I want to differentiate. Do females get the same amount of funding for higher education as or school education as male kids? Administer items to individuals identified as belonging to the groups. Perform analysis to identify items that persons in the opposite groups answer. Our best items are those that discriminate between the groups. So I do the preliminary study, then identify which are the items which discriminate, that is, which differentiate between these two groups. That is my scale. The factor analytic approach is administer items to a large sample of individuals. We are not having groups here. We just give it to a large sample, compute correlation among items, use factor analysis as a technique to determine how many dimensions underlie the data and interpret the factors that emerge. The best items are those that load highest on each factor. Rational approach is you delineate the construct, that is, define the construct, write items to capture the construct by combining behaviors that exemplify the construct, use targeted statistical methods like item analysis, and best items are those that correlate highest with the sum of the rest of the items in the scale. Okay, this is a statistical thing. How to choose a scale construction method? You may go for empirical keying if you want to assess a complex, multifaceted concept. One has commitment to empirical validation and inductive derivation of theory from data, then method 2, factor analytic, may be optimal. If the research aims concentration on development of scales to test a priori theories, that is the theory which has already been proposed, then you can do a rational approach. Now the question that comes up is, if I do a group discussion, I'm doing a group discussion for identifying the items, then I'm doing what is called as an a priori theory. I'm doing a rational approach. I put up a lot of items and I use a factor analysis to understand the underlying variables, and I do factor analytic. Okay. So these are the three approaches. What approach you use, many times a researcher will not be able to define personally. We may combine all three approaches just to come out with a questionnaire which works. But a very good researcher will know why they are putting an item or why they are not putting an item in a particular questionnaire, because they know what approach they are using. So you generate sample of items using different techniques like experience surveys, insight simulating examples, critical incidents, focus groups, literature search. Okay. So these are some of the things that you can do. Critical incidents. See, for example, I want to talk about road safety. I talk to people who have seen an accident or who have suffered an accident. Okay. That will give me a understanding of the person, because they have already fine. So let me, I think I'm already at 11:11. So let me just come to the end of it. The emphasis in the early stages of item generation would be to develop a set of items which tap into different dimensions of the constructed issue. Include items with slightly different shades of meaning, because the original list will be refined to produce a final measure. Experienced researchers can attest that seemingly identical statements produce widely different answers. By incorporating slightly different nuances of the meaning in statement, that's what the language I mentioned, the researcher provides a better foundation for the eventual measure. Each statement would be reviewed for precise wording, double-barreled statements, positively stated, negatively stated. The finalist's attention should also be directed refining those questions which contain an obviously socially acceptable response. The socially acceptable response is a major problem. If I ask somebody, do you believe in women equality? I'm very sure that 99.9% people will say yes, or give a higher score on the positive side for their answer. If I ask, please rate the amount of immense equality you are seeing in the society, the answer is maybe a little bit more nuanced. So you have to be very clear that the questions have something called as biases of personal nature, and the question should actually be asked in such a way that the biases can be neutralized to some extent. How to do item editing? Feedback from core researchers, other experts, feedback from respondents, review from language experts, translate and retranslate so that the language is correct. Pilot study with the option of not relevant question. This is something that I like to use. I'll ask the respondents, is this question relevant to you or not? Review of measures by experts is what is called face validity also. Interview with experts who reviewed the questionnaire to ensure precision in the draft of the measures. Talk to people who have expertise in that topic that you're studying so that you are doing correctly what is expected of you. You do a pilot study. This is the first step. After you do a pre-test actually with the experts. This is what we mentioned. And you do a pilot study. Then you do what is called purification of the measure. Okay. And then you do purify the measures using coefficient alpha. That is, the Cronbach alpha is going to be increased because an item is dropped. Then you may say that, okay, let me drop this and see. But the judgment has to be based on what that item is measuring, and dropping that, does it make loss or benefit to your measure? And you do factor analysis. Again, lower loading you can remove, higher loading or cross loading items you can drop. Again, I'm not going into the statistical techniques per se. These exist. You do an iteration approach of purification. That is, you do the previous steps again and again till you are purifying, you are convinced with the quality of your instrument or quality of your scale. Then you go to what is called face validity or content validity. This is where the reliability part, you look at whether the language is correct. Scale reliability is popularly reported through Cronbach alpha. Construct validity is about specifying the domain, generating items, purification of the scale, which is content valid or face valid and reliable. Construct validity, which lies at the very heart of scientific process, is more directly related to the question of what the instrument is in fact measuring. To establish the construct validity of a measure, the analyst must also determine 1, the extent to which the measure correlates with other measures designed to measure the same thing, and 2, whether the measure behaves as expected. Okay, clear? So the point we are taking is the extent to which the measure correlates with other measures designed to measure the same thing. Now, obviously, if something has been measured by different methods, you can do that correlation. The second thing is more easy, whether the measure behaves as expected. For example, if I say females are more hardworking than males, that is the observation that I've got, and my study also gives the same answer. Okay. Now, that is also very judgmental in nature. We don't know. But let me say this. The students who have studied engineering are more mathematically inclined than students who have studied arts. It looks logical because somebody has done 10 years of education in maths and somebody has done a large amount of study on higher level mathematics. It should be at least, obviously it may also be proven wrong for certain people, but we are not going with exceptions, we are going with general rules. Convergent validity is whether there is a convergence or not. If you are having convergence of item on a particular variable, that's what called convergent validity. And discriminant validity is where one measure, that is one variable and another variable, are discriminant enough, that is, are different enough so that there is not much of correlation between these variables and another variables. Construct validity, does the measure behave as expected? This is also called as criterion validity. For example, if I say people who have studied technical courses are more computer literate than students who have not studied technical courses. Students who have studied arts courses are more creative than students who have studied non-arts courses. Maybe if that logic says that is true, then you can see whether the predictability is there or not. I think Upender, I think this
Yes,
is
sir. Yes, sir. Madam, yes. Madam. Sirisha, madam.
So,
Yes, yes.
Yes, students, if you have any questions, you can ask now.
Yeah, this is a session for questions and answers. If you have any questions, you can ask, sir.
Student?
From part
Shailaja and somebody else are there.
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, sir. Sir, can you just explain about dichotomous variable?
dichotomous, 2 levels.
Yes, sir.
See, sometimes you may not want to ask questions which are having multiple levels. You see, for example, would you like to purchase the product or not? Can there be multiple levels of purchasing a product? Either you purchase or you don't purchase. Either I attend the office or I don't attend the office. Either I take the job or not take the job. Can there be a range of answers in those situations? Did you get the answer that you are asking?
Yes, sir.
So in situations where the multiple levels of response is not needed or not possible, you go for what are called dichotomous questions. Okay. Basically, these are done at the end of it all. If you are using simple regression or you are using logistic regression, then you have this dichotomous questions as a dichotomous is used for logistical regression. So the questions, the kind of data you are capturing will determine the kind of statistical technique you use. And sometimes you come back and say, this is the statistical technique I would like to use. So the question will be like this. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, again,
Thank
can
you,
you
Vishal.
explain me more about latent variables once more, if you don't mind, sir?
The latent variable is something which is not directly measurable. Okay. What cannot be directly measured has to be measured through other means. That is why it is called latent. Latent means it is hidden. Okay. Now let us take any psychological variable. For example, I want to measure the stress of a person. I want to measure whether the person is under stress or not under stress. Or I want to take, let us say, a construct called quality of work life. I want to know whether you have a quality work life or not. Okay. Can I directly say you have good quality work life, no bad quality work life? Somebody may like to work for 18 hours a day and not give time to their family because they don't have any family responsibilities. Somebody may say, no, I'll work for 12 hours because I have a large amount of my family responsibilities. And that changes from situation to situation also. So how do I measure this quality of work life? So I'll have certain observations that I can make regarding whether the person has good relations with family, whether they think they are spending sufficient time on with their kids, with their parents, with their spouse. Okay. Then based on these observed criteria, I make an inference on the quality of work life. That is why it is a latent construct. Customer satisfaction, service quality, you can take any of them. Since you can't directly measure it, you are measuring through other observations of related dimensions. Okay. So that is why it is called as latent construct. I think you got the answer that I'm asking.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir.
Fine, thank you. Good.
Yes.
Next question.
Any
Sir?
questions?
Please.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Sir, will you share your PPT with us? So
I think
just
they
in
will
case we
upload the
want to-
recording onto YouTube. That's what I was told. So
Okay.
you can obviously see it again and again.
Thank you, sir.
PPT I can share. That's not a problem. You can please send me an email on my official ID. I can just send you a reply back. I don't want to share it in a public forum without knowing who is taking it. Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Please, you have my email ID on the university website. You can just type my name and you will get my details on the university website. My contact details as well as my WhatsApp number and things like that. Okay. Just send me an email and you will get it.
Yes. Any questions? Yes.
Any questions related to the topic or not related to the topic is fine. Okay. If I can answer them, I'll answer.
If you don't have any questions, we can go for the vote of thanks.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, madam.
Sir, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Good morning, sir. I am Bhavna Revadikar.
Okay.
I want to know how to perform the risk of bias assessment.
Risk of bias.
Bias assessment.
Okay.
How to perform it?
I am not sure of your question. Let me try to understand the question. You want to measure the risk of bias assessment of what?
Assessment.
Bias assessment of what?
For systematic review.
Systematic review of what? Again, are you talking about purchase of a product? Are you talking about a service? Are you talking about something else? Because buyers assess a lot of things. Buyer means somebody who's purchasing things. They are assessing for what? Are they assessing the product quality? Are they assessing the performance of the product? Are they assessing the performance of service?
Performance of service.
Okay, you want to evaluate a service being performed. Are they the persons who are getting the service? Are the service performed on a particular product or an object? Because services have multiple criteria categories. Okay, is it a person specific service? Is it a position related service? Is it an information related service?
Okay.
Are you getting the kind of theory that goes into this question? I'm not trying to answer the question right away. I'm trying to give you an understanding of how you can evaluate your question.
Okay.
You have to understand that whenever you are talking about a construct, any latent construct, any measurement, first and foremost challenge is in defining the theory of that construct.
Okay.
If you're talking about buyer assessment, buyer, who is the buyer is the first point. Are they technically competent to assess? Because if it's an industrial product, yes, definitely they are competent to assess because they are also trained people for that. You and I as consumers may not be trained. Even the television that comes to our house, if I ask you, is it a good television or a bad television, you will give what is given as opinions by different people. Okay. Because we are not competent to evaluate their technical features. But somebody who is somebody who is an electronics and communications or a television technology person may have a better technical understanding of assessing the quality of that product. So defining the construct is the first challenge that you've got. So you are talking about risk, you are talking about buyer assessment of service. Okay, which type of service? Again, the questions will change because a service will have a different attributes because of this concept of perishability, intangibility, inseparability, and things like that. A good has a different way of assessment. Okay, it's more tangible in nature, so the assessment will be more technical in nature.
Okay.
So now, if the person is technically qualified to measure, the risk is minimal, provided they have the technology to measure it. For example, the quality of steel that goes into construction of a building. Obviously, I have the equipment to measure. There is no risk of my assessment going wrong. But if I'm talking about the interior decoration and whether the customer will like it or not, then obviously somebody likes pink, somebody likes green, somebody likes blue. I don't even know what color scheme works. So you have to be really flexible in that. So these are some of the theoretical things that readily comes to my mind. I cannot give you an answer that please go with so and so scale because that's not my area of research. But if you are really looking at a particular scale and you want to understand the evaluation criteria for that particular measurement scale to be adopted or not, please send me an email and we will try to discuss and come to a conclusion based on what the research requires. Okay? You don't have ready-made answers unless you are a researcher on that topic for a long time.
Okay, sure, sir. I will contribute.
Sure.
And thank you so much.
Any researcher in that subject, people will talk to you.
Okay, thank you so much, sir.
Sure. Thank you.
Yes.
Anybody else?
Surisha madam. Yes, Surisha madam.
Yes,
You
sir.
can go for a vote of thanks.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for your valuable information, sir. So, on behalf of Mother Teresa College, I would like to take the opportunity to vote of thanks who have directly and indirectly contributed to this e-workshop on scale development in social science research, organized by our institute. So, before concluding the session, I request all the participants to fill and submit the feedback form, which we are sharing in Google Meet chat box and YouTube line. Only please fill the form with capital letters, and participants who will submit the feedback form only will get certificate in a FCFS manner. So I feel very fortunate to be a part of the e-workshop. Thank you everyone. Have a pleasant day. Stay home and stay safe. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Nagapavan sir.
Thank you, Upender, and it was nice sharing my ideas with the people. Okay, please type my name in Google and you will get related papers as well as the contact details of mine. Okay, or you can contact Upenderji and he can also share it with you. Thank you and have a nice day. Stay safe,
you,
stay healthy. Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
I'm
sir.
logging with Upender.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Dear participants, just now I shared feedback form. Fill carefully. And before that, I shared my YouTube channel name, and you can watch video later. Yes, Sirisha madam.
Yes, sir.
Principal sir came. Sir, you can.
Okay, good morning,
address us.
everyone. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Congratulations to the MBA department for organizing
Thank
this
you, sir.
workshop. And my special thanks to the resource person, sir. Heartful thanks on behalf of our college, on behalf of my principal and management. And we expect in future also your guidance to our students, sir. Okay, and congratulations and all the best to all the participants from various places. So I expect the similar cooperation from participants and from my MBA department and the resource person also. So once again, my heartful thanks to everyone.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for your initiative.
Yes, dear participant, the